Dear God, I just want to thank you for these students, Lord. Lord, I don't know what's going on in their lives, Lord, but I just pray as we start this series in Daniel, Lord, would there be some things that would really relate to how they're living life right now as teenagers, Lord? And would you continue to work in their lives? Would you spur them on, Lord? Would you get them excited to want to live for you and do amazing things for you, Lord? Would you use them? We love you so much in your name. Amen. When I was going into junior high, I loved basketball. And it was my favorite sport, and I'd practice all the time. And then in middle school, they had tryouts. Now, I don't know what your school is like, but my school, we had 3 teams. We had the 8th grade team, the 7th grade team, and the 6th grade team, and they kind of were more like the A, B, and C team because if you were good enough, you could move up to those. You didn't have to be in that grade. And I remember that I was a 6th grader, and I went to tryouts, and I was excited to just show the coach that I was good enough to maybe make the 6th grade team and maybe even start. And I remember I showed up to tryouts, and everyone's there, like 6th through 8th. I mean, there's a ton of people there, and you're wanting to do whatever you can to stand out. And I was a little lucky because, like, 3 of the best 8th graders were still in football, and it hadn't gotten over, so they were going to miss tryouts. But I remember I went to tryouts, and I was working my butt off. I mean, I was doing whatever I could because I wanted to impress the coach. And I remember right at the end of tryouts, the coach says, Travis, come here right now. And, of course, I'm going to do anything the coach tells me to do. So I go running to him as fast as I can. And I'm sweating. I'm like, yeah, coach, what's up? And he's like, Travis, can you answer a question for me? I'm like, yes, coach. And he's real serious. He's like, are you left-handed? I said, yes, coach, I'm left-handed. He's like, no, you're not. You are not left-handed. I'm like, yes, coach, I'm left-handed. He's like, okay, hold on. You dribble so good with your right. Where did you learn to do that? And I was like, well, coach, my dad said if I want to go to UCLA, I have to be able to dribble with both hands and be really good at dribbling with both hands. And he's like, Trav, I was so impressed with just your dribbling that I'm telling you right now, from now on, you are going to be my starting point guard for the 8th grade team. So as a 6th grader, I got to be on the 8th grade team, and then for the 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I was the starting point guard just because I could dribble really good with both hands, just that small thing. And maybe I was pretty good, but that was a big thing that he had told me, okay? But the crazy part is this. We are going to be going into this book of Daniel. We are starting a new series, and I'm really, really excited about this new series where we are going to look at 4 teenagers, or at least they started as teenagers, not much older than you. And you are going to see God do some crazy, crazy things and use them to do some crazy things throughout this book. In fact, this book is probably one of my favorite books when it comes to craziest, coolest stories, and I can't wait for us to dive in. And so we are going to go in through this book of Daniel. We're actually going to go for the first 6 chapters. There's actually 12. 7 through 12, we might touch a little bit, but really there's just a lot of these crazy prophecies that are sometimes hard for us to explain, but we're going to be going through these first 6 chapters, and I'm so excited about it. And today we are going to start with chapter 1. And chapter 1, you are going to find out it's about the small things that Daniel and his buddies did. Just like Coach saying, Trav, man, because you could dribble with your right hand really well, I want to use you. And we're going to see some small things that God is working, small things that Daniel's buddies could do that was starting to prepare them for what was going to happen. So if you have your Bibles, open up Daniel chapter 1, and let me give you a little bit of history real quick. I'm going to try to fly through it, but letting you know, if you were to go back to 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 and 2 Chronicles, you have this story of God's people where they asked for a king, and he gave them a king. And then they were supposed to follow him. And there's even a time where after Saul was the first king, David the second king, then Solomon, David's son, was the third king. And after Solomon, because he had made some mistakes and not honored God, God split the kingdom in half. And you have the north, that was 10 tribes, that was called Israel still. And then you have the 2 south ones that were called Judah, and those were still in the line where they kept the line of David. And the north, they didn't honor God anymore. They were kind of wicked. It was wicked king, maybe one good king once, and then wicked all the time. And eventually, that kingdom was taken over by another power that came and totally took them out, took over their area, and then it was just Judah was left. And Judah, when you look at their kings, you had good king, good king, good king, bad king, good king, bad king, good king, good king, bad king, good, 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 kind of like that, kind of is up and down. But still, because of their sin, God said eventually through the prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah, they're saying, guess what? God is eventually going to come, and he's going to take this kingdom away from the Israelites, but only for a period. And then right at the end of the Judah's time, Babylon, the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, came, and he took over Judah. And he just took over Judah, and the prophets said that, don't worry, they'll be able to come 70 years later, but we're going to come to the story, and here's where we start. It is the beginning of the story. Nebuchadnezzar comes, takes over Judah, and the beginning of Daniel, it talks about King Nebuchadnezzar, and it says this story of here's what happened, is when he is taking this over, he decided to take, I love it, the best of the best with him back to Babylon to teach them his ways. And most of these noble sons, these princes, they were all going to be in that age of like 14 to 17, which is crazy, pretty close to your age. So we know Daniel and his buddies right now are somewhere in that 14 to 17 range, and they're getting taken back to Babylon, and that's where we come to our story. And I want to start with verse 3. It says this, then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring in some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. I want the best of the best, which is kind of cool because we know Daniel and his buddies are part of this. So guess what? So that means they were the best of the best. Smart, good-looking, intelligent, no physical defect, which I don't fully know what that means, what would make that, but just perfect pretty much. And a great people, and this is what he took, and he was going to train them. It says this, he was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians, and the king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. And they were to be trained for 3 years. And after that, they were to enter the king's service. So here's what happens, is Nebuchadnezzar wants the best and brightest of the Israelites of Judah to come. And his big thing is this, is I'm going to take those and I'm going to train them. I'm going to do school, 3 years of school. But I'm going to train them everything about what I want. And I'm going to train them to be incredible Babylonians. Okay? Guess what? There was 3 years of school. You are in school right now. So this is perfect setting of the story. This would have been like you guys. But then he says that he was going to give them the best food even. You don't understand, back then, the king got allotted wine and special food. That was a big deal, but it was such a big deal for these people to be amazing that he was even given that kind of food. But here's the thing. If you keep reading, it says in verse 6 that Daniel, though, decided, wait a minute, I don't want to eat that food. You see, here's the problem. That food that they were going to be given, we know that there were two things wrong with it. One, it was not going to be kosher. Kosher is what God asked the Jews to eat a certain way. They were supposed to only eat foods, and there was a lot of rules on the foods they were supposed to eat and the way they were supposed to eat it. And actually, we find out later it's because of really things we already know about different bacterias and different diseases that are on foods, and God was protecting them. So that was kind of a cool thing. But they couldn't eat certain foods. I mean, that was against the Bible. And secondly, it was against the law for them as Israelites of Judah. They weren't allowed to eat foods sacrificed to idols. And this food would have fit both of that. So Daniel gets with his buddies and decides, no, we're not going to eat this. We're going to revolt right here in the lunch line. We're not going to eat this food. Now, they didn't quite do it in that angry of a way, but they go and talk to the head of the guy that's in charge, like the principal, and say, hey, listen, is there any way that we can eat vegetables? We don't want to eat this food. Can we just eat vegetables and drink water? And he's like, are you crazy? You're missing on the best food. And we're like, yeah, I'd be agreeing with him. But they're like, you're missing out. He's like, nope, we can't. And the guy's like, you don't understand. If I just give you vegetables and water and all of a sudden you look weaker and you don't pan out, the king will kill me. He will go, why do these people look like peons and wussy kids and here everyone else looks great? And he was worried about that. So Daniel, through the wisdom of God, says, hey, listen, why don't we do a little test? Why don't you let us just try eating vegetables and water just for 10 days? And if we look worse than everyone, and if we don't even look better than them, we will go back to eating the other food. And the king's like, I mean, this principal's like, well, all right, let's make that deal. Well, it's cool. If you fast forward, it says in verse 15 of chapter 1, it says, at the end of the 10 days, this is awesome. This is crazy. Look how much God's working. It says this, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and wine, and they were to drink, and gave them vegetables instead. And if you keep reading, it says right here, to these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds, which we're going to find out more as we keep going in these next 5 chapters. And at the end of the time set by the king to bring them in, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar, and the king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. It's unbelievable. At the end of this time, Daniel and his buddies, and actually you're going to know these 3 buddies actually has a different name. If you know Daniel's story a little bit, their names are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Okay, you're going to find out those were the names they were given by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. But you're going to find out that he looked at them and he said, these guys are better than us. And not only was he impressed, he put them as top of his people. He put them in his royal court, and they were treated specially, and they got a lot more favor. God rewarded them and blessed them. And that's the end of chapter 1. Now, I want to be honest with you. When I first heard the story, I'm like, okay, that's a cool story. It's about 4 kids in a lunch line deciding not to eat what the king wanted them to do, and God still blessed them. It's a cool little story. But here's the crazy part. As we start reading the next 5 chapters, there's some crazy stuff that's going to happen. And so a lot of times I'd fly by this because this wasn't my favorite one to read. I mean, it's a cool little story, but nothing special. I'm like, yeah, we got to get to chapter 2, crazy. You got to see chapter 3 is even more intense. You got to see chapter 5. I mean, it's pretty awesome. And we're going to get there. But sometimes I would kind of gloss over the story because I'm like, okay, so with these. So they stand up to the Babylonian king, and God blessed them by eating vegetables. In fact, I think a lot of times I didn't want to eat vegetables. But here's what I started to find out is this story might be the most important story in this whole book, even though it's not as crazy. Because as I've been starting to read and starting to dig, I start to understand this story doesn't have as cool of a story because there's something that God was starting to do with Daniel and his buddies. You see, they're going to be pretty soon used to do some crazy stuff. And I think God wanted to test to see if they are ready. Hey, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I got some crazy stuff I'm going to do in your life. You are going to have to stand up some crazy pressures. You're going to have death threats. There's a chance that you might even be killed, all this stuff. But I want to know if you're ready. I want to know if you're ready to actually be used by me. So I'm going to do a little test. I want to see if you're going to trust me and obey me, even these small things that don't seem that important. And what's awesome about Daniel and his buddies is they passed the test. They passed the test, and then God was saying, see, now I know. Now I know you're ready. Just put your seatbelts on, buckle up. It's going to be crazy. And as I was reading that, it started to think, oh, my goodness, these were teenagers not much older than you. And I started to realize, I think this relates to us as junior hires. Because, see, I think here's what's happening is I want you to know something. I believe that God wants to use every single one of you. And not because I'm this prophet and I just know. No, the Bible's pretty clear that he wants to use every single one of you and has a game plan for you and a desire to use you for the kingdom. I know that for a fact. And I think God wants to do some pretty awesome, amazing, crazy things in your life. But I think the problem is he wants to know if we're ready. He's like, I want to know, are you ready? How do I know you're ready? Because how do I know he does that? Because that's what he did with Daniel and his 3 buddies. And that's the thing I want you to know is this. The first fill-in, it's not a blank up there, but you can fill this and it says, are you ready to be used by God? My first question is, are you ready to be used by God? Because God was testing Daniel and them to see if they were going to be ready. And I want to find out, are you guys ready? Because I think he wants to use you, but he wants to see if you're ready. So here's what I want to do for the remainder of this time. I want to give you 3 things that you can do to be ready. So if you want to do it, 3 things you can start doing to be ready. I want to talk about 3 things you can do right now to be ready to be used by God. And I feel like if you start doing these things now, God's going to go, okay, I think you're ready. And that's when some crazy things are going to happen in your life. Crazy, scary, amazing things. But I don't know if you're ready, so let's check it out. 3 things to know if you're ready or to start doing to be ready. First thing is this: make a commitment right now. If you want to be ready, the first thing you do is you need to make a commitment right now. You're like, but Trav, what does that mean? I mean, make a commitment right now to follow God. Make a commitment right now that you're like, God, I am going to follow you right now. I remember when I was in high school, and I was going to Vista High. One of my best friends was going to RBV. And I remember we were hanging out. We had just made tapioca pudding. Okay, and you don't understand, we had learned these secrets. Like, we learned this secret. There's this old recipe where you can make it fluffier, and it's amazing. And we just don't have time to talk about the details. But one day I'll do a talk because it's unbelievable. So we just got done making our tapioca pudding. And we were sitting on his bed in his room, and we're eating our tapioca pudding, and we're talking. And I don't know why, but we were both at that moment on fire for God. And we looked and said, you know what? I think it's different. We need to be different. We go to these schools where our friends aren't Christians. And I remember right there, we made a commitment to God. We said, God, you know what? We are not going to do drugs. We're not going to drink. And we're not going to have sex till we get married. And I remember we did like a pinky swear. We looked at each other like, yeah, and it's like me and you. It was awesome. We had made this commitment right there. And remember, there were times in that next few years where we were in situations, but I knew we made this commitment. I knew I had this commitment. It's crazy how because I did that, there were times that sometimes it didn't even seem like pressure, the situation, because like I already made that commitment. That's what I'm going to do. I love it. It says in Daniel 1:6, it's right here. It says this, Daniel, and this is in the New King James, says Daniel proposed in his heart not to defile himself. He made a commitment. He proposed in his heart that he wasn't going to defile himself. That was a promise. I'm willing to bet when Nebuchadnezzar took these guys, and they're on their donkeys or their horses or their train, their wagons or whatever they are going from Israel to Babylon, because it was probably like a 20-day journey. I don't know, it was a crazy journey. I bet you as they're riding, they're in the back on the bed and they're making this commitment. Hey, we don't know what's going to happen in Babylon. I don't know what this king's going to have us do. But dude, let's make a commitment right now that we're going to honor God no matter what. And I kind of feel like because for Daniel to do this, he must have had a commitment that he'd already made, that God, I'm not going to defile you. He said, I already made this commitment. So it made it easy when he got in the lunch line. It made it easier. I love it. Joshua in Joshua 24, it's right after they had taken over their promised land, and he's pretty much done. He said, choose you this day who will you serve. It's on your note sheets. You can look that up later. Joshua 24, choose you this day who you're going to serve. Who are you going to serve? Make him right now. Are you going to serve God, or are you going to serve the world? But you got to make the commitment now. The second thing you do to make sure you are ready is this: obey God with the little things. Obey God with the little things. See, here's the thing is, we need to be willing to obey God with the little things. It's so funny. It's so crazy how it works in life. We get the big things. We understand that, I remember growing up, I realized, God, I'm never going to murder someone. It's like, well, yeah, that makes sense. That's really, you get that one. The major stuff, God, I'm never going to cheat on my wife. That's a big one. There's these major ones. But here's the thing is, we need to actually obey God with even the small things, the little things. Like, I'll be honest with you, when I was interviewing for this job, they didn't go, hey, Trav, did you ever cheat on a test in junior high? When we interview pastors, we don't go, hey, did you ever cheat on a test? Okay, did you ever steal candy when you were a little kid? Hey, did you ever lie to someone? It's funny, we don't. And honestly, if they even said, yeah, I did cheat on a test, we wouldn't go, nope, can't be a pastor now. We'd go, oh, you were a kid. It's not a big deal. But I want you to understand, no, it's actually those small things that God is testing with. He's testing us with that. I love it. It says right here in Luke 16:10, it says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with little will be dishonest with much. And I know this verse is exactly talking about money, But it's also talking about how we live our lives. It's talking this idea of what we are honest with little, we're going to be trusted with much more. And see, it's the small things. It's how we do life with the small things. Are we obedient with the small things? For instance, Daniel and his buddies, they decided not to eat food. They were in a country where if they said, we're not going to eat that, they could be killed. And so I'll be honest with you, it'd be easy to go, hey, Daniel, did you ever eat that food? 10 years later, and he's like, dude, are you joking? I was scared I was going to lose my life. And you'd be like, yeah, I probably done the same thing. Yeah, I'd probably done the same thing. That's not that big of a lie. That's not that big of a sin. Whoop-dee. But what was crazy is because they trusted God and obeyed him with that small thing, God says, I think you're ready for more. And I think the hard part is a lot of times we're not willing to obey God in those small things because we think, who cares? What's the big deal? And we understand God's saying, but that's how it starts. If you want me to use you with big things, it's going to start with these small things. And I'm willing to bet we've already lost that battle a lot. We've lost the battle on how we talk about people. We've lost the battle on, hey, it was just a lie, but it wasn't a big deal. It was just to get me in trouble because and there's these areas where we are not obeying God because they seem small right now. They seem small, but we don't understand the effect they have is huge. But here's what I want you to understand is this. Daniel and his buddies are lucky. They, on the small things, it worked out. They said, we're going to honor God, and I don't care if you kill me, almost like that. And all of a sudden, they're like, okay, we'll give a test. And all of a sudden, they were bigger, stronger, smarter, and the king rewarded them. But I want you to know something. There are going to be times in your life where you're going to do the right thing, and you're not going to get rewarded. In fact, you might even get punished. I remember my friends, they all cheated on a test. Literally, almost all my friends on this one test, they'd got the answer. They chose not to. And guess what happened? They all got A's, and I got like a C-. And you're like, but wait, God, I did the right thing. Sometimes it doesn't pan out. I remember my friends, they stole something. They all want to start traveling. We're getting this. I'm like, no, you can't do that. And they stole it, and no one caught them, and they had all this cool stuff, and I had nothing. And I was like, but God, I did the right thing. I remember when I was in high school, I'd made that commitment with my friend to wait to have sex till I got married. But what's crazy is there were people that knew that, and they would tease me all the time. And I still remember this one time where my friends just started teasing me, and everyone's laughing. And the girl that I was kind of in love with at that time, even she was laughing and mocking me. I'm like, God, but I'm doing the right thing. See, sometimes we can be obedient, and it might not pan out. But God says, but Trav, you don't understand. I'm still going to use you. Just need to wait. You're honoring me with the small things. Just wait till the big things come. We need to obey God in the small moments. The small things that don't seem a big deal because God's using it to test to see if we're ready for the big stuff. And the last thing is this, is we need to cling to a godly friend group. We need to cling to a godly friend group. You see, if you want to be ready to God use you in amazing ways, if you want to be ready to take on what's going to happen, how God's going to do some really cool things, I want you to know you're not going to be able to do it alone. The Bible's clear. You can't do life alone. I love it. On your note sheets in Proverbs, it's not up there, but there's a verse that talks about iron sharpens iron. We need other Christians that are sharpening us. You look at Daniel, he had his 3 buddies. I will tell you right now, if he did not have his 3 buddies, I don't know if he would have the courage to do it. And there were times in high school where I was getting so much crap, being teased for so many things. And you know what kept me going on? Is I had a friend that we were able to make a commitment, a pinky swear or something like that, that said, no, you and I, we're going to be different. And he'd be like, Trav, did you mess up? And it's like, no, we're going to stay strong. And I want to let you know something. I don't think you can do it alone. We need to cling to a godly friend group. Here's what's cool. If you come to TNL, we're putting you in a godly friend group. We're hoping that you're going to find Christian friends that you guys are all like, we're going to make commitments together. Now, I understand this. Don't put all your stock into TNL because some of you are in small groups that I'm like, okay, you shouldn't be friends with those people. Okay? Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you need to change and go, you know what? I want to be the person in my group that people go, I want to be different like you guys. I mean, I wish I could say every group at TNL is perfect. Man, take it. No, but I'm telling you this. We're at least giving you a place where you can meet Christian friends and start to have this thing where you can cling to this godly Christian group. And here's what I will tell you. Some of you, you are not hanging out with Christian friends. In fact, the friends in your life, they would have been the ones that would have said, no, Daniel, don't do that. Let's eat more food. Let's eat this. Let's act this way. Let's do this. They would have pushed them a different way. But we need godly friends in our life. And I might say, you know what? I'm not telling you don't be friends with them anymore, but you might need to take a long look. Maybe it's something you got to pray about. God, should these people be friends in my lives? Because I will tell you this, you might have to make a hard decision. In college, I had some friends that were pretty much starting to just take me down a different road. And they were my best friends. And I had to literally 180 and go, I will never hang out with them again. And I just stopped hanging out with them, and I clung to a Christian godly group here. It was the hardest thing. They were friends that I'd had. Guess what? One of them was the one I made the pinky swear with. In college, he started doing all that stuff, and I felt pressure to go that way. Almost like I think what happened is he made those mistakes. He's like, no, Trav, please come with me because then I won't feel guilty. And I was like, I can't, and I had to actually literally not talk to them again. These guys probably would have been in my wedding. But I stopped talking to them to where they didn't even come to my wedding. And I'm willing to bet they thought, Trav, you hate him. It's like, no, I didn't hate you. I just knew that if I was around you guys, I would have made mistakes. I had to walk away. Cling to a godly friends. Because the friends I got all of a sudden later were the ones that pushed me. That's why I'm in ministry today. Listen, I think God wants to do something amazing like he did in Daniel. And you're going to hear the crazy stories. But it starts in a lunch line. It starts in this lunch line. A lunch line. That he decided, I'm going to be different. He obeyed God with the small things. Hey, I want you to be ready because I don't know what he's going to do in your life, but I think he's going to do something amazing. And it starts with making a commitment today. Are you going to follow him? Obey him with the small things and then find those godly friends. Here's my challenge for you. Really, the challenge should be just do all three of those. Do all three of them. But I will say this. I think the most important right now is this, because I'd want to say two's most important, but one, I think it starts right now that you make a commitment between you and God, and you say, God, I am going to follow you today. I want you to be Lord of my life. And Lord, I want to be used by you. I think it starts with a commitment. That's my challenge. Will you make that commitment? Maybe when I am closing in prayer, it needs to be you and God talking. You're like, God, I want to be different. I want to be like Daniel and his buddies and be used with you to do some amazing things. So that's my challenge. Let me go ahead and pray. Dear God, I just thank you so much for who you are. Lord, I don't know what you want to do in these students' lives, but Lord, I know it starts first with this commitment and this ability to just obey in the small things, Lord. Lord, I pray these students will start doing it now. And Lord, I pray that you would get them ready so you can start using to do something greater, because I know you have that plan. We love you so much in your name. Amen.